Okay, here's a video about how to bounce back from academic setbacks. So I often tutor students, like college students and grad students. People send them to me, or sometimes the students come to me and ask me questions, okay? And the first thing I'd say, why they have a hard time the last semester, the last year. And I would say try to figure out what happened, okay? In my experience, most students are really very poorly prepared. Okay, so a lot of people say, well, I got A's in high school. I could give a rat's tail. When you compete at the college level, the grad school level, the students are better than they were on average at your high school. So you have to also improve your academic skills, your study skills, your time management, and all that. Okay, and in my experience of having worked with a lot of doctors who flunked their boards, they usually have poor study skills. Okay, and there is such a thing as high level study skills, and you want to try to develop those. Why not? You'll improve your performance and you'll get more for your time. Because the first question to ask yourself is, what is school? A lot of people don't even know what school is. School, and I'm talking about biology in most college and grad school, it's a memorization contest. You have to memorize what the teacher wants you to memorize from their lectures and from the book, and then you take a test on it. So you want to be good at memorization. Study memorization. Study how the memory champions win memory contests. Read Super Memory Super Student by Harry Lorraine about how to optimize your memory. You should know all that stuff. Mnemonics, letter number, alphabet, word associations. You should be intimately familiar with all that stuff if you want to be a top-notch student. Okay? The next thing is use the good study skills. You should have condensed notes. You should know walk and talk self-test. I give lots and lots of lectures. I've written like 3-4 books on study skills, and I got a whole bunch of lectures on how to raise IQ and improve your study skills. You should watch all that stuff. You should know it backwards and forwards. Okay? Then you could also ask yourself, what happened? Sometimes it's because the teacher's a jerk. A lot of college professors are jerks. A lot of them stink. Okay? I've had students at Ivy League level colleges tell me that their teachers are basically insane. I had a student from one of these Ivy League type colleges. Their student was like a transvestite, transsexual something, and insisted all the students must tell the class their protons, their pronouns, and they must use the correct pronouns. If you didn't use the correct pronouns, you would get your grade deducted. I mean, that's insane. That was at a Ivy League type school, college, that the students were they said that everybody was all tense and stressed out in class because they were afraid they would forget other people's pronouns, and it was very difficult to speak, and they said it was awful. And then what I've seen in a lot of these Ivy League level schools, you'll have these teaching assistants, and the teaching assistants can barely speak English. And the whole thing's kind of like a big joke. And no one cares because at the big name schools, they really want to do research and they don't care about teaching the students, okay? So I've had tons of students tell me their college professors were just terrible, awful, nasty, vindictive, terrible teachers, terrible communicators. They're really bad. There's no meritocracy whatsoever in college professors, and it's because the colleges know that the students want a degree to get to move on in their careers, so that they're going to pay the tuition no matter how bad the professor is. And because of that, the professors are really bad. If this colleges actually had to compete for students, then they would try to have better professors, but they don't care. So what does that mean? That means that you're on your own. If you get a teacher that's nice and knows how to teach well, consider yourself very lucky. A vast majority of the time, you're probably just going to have to teach yourself. Like I've seen teachers in the writing classes, they don't know how to write themselves. They can't write well. They don't, a lot of writing is personality. It's learning how to put your personality into your writing. I mean, the whole secret of writing is act like you're talking to an intelligent friend. Almost all the rules of writing come into that. When you're with a friend, you want to have fun. You want to tell jokes. You only say stuff that's useful. You can have multiple simultaneous threads going on. All right. Okay, what else? The other thing I see about a lot of students, what I noticed is, I wrote the book called The Medical Student's Guide to Top Board Scores. I had graduated first in my medical school class, 99% on my medical school boards. I was friends with the dean. He was very good to me. He let me interview all the students that had scored in the top 10% of their medical school boards, like 2 years after me, and I wrote an entire book, Medical Student Guide to Top Board Scores. I interviewed all these students, and here's what I saw. The students that were scoring in the top 10%, top 5% of their class, they tended to be all workaholics, very conscientious, very good at judging where they were at in the class, calibrating their work, and they were kind of workaholics, okay? And then I also did a lot of tutoring. I tutored in the urban health program, and I tutored in other programs, and I tutored a lot of students that were on academic probation that had flunked several classes and whatnot. And what I saw was most of them were kind of lazy. Okay, now they didn't think of themselves as lazy because they were working harder than they had, let's say, in their college or their high school. But compared to the students in the top 5 or 10% of the class, they were lazy. Okay. And it's enough just to want to get good grades, to do well academically at the high school, college, grad school level. Because I know 3 girls that were all second in their medical school classes. And all 3 of them, in my opinion, really didn't have much ambition. They just wanted to do well in their med school class. They wanted to be competent at their job. They didn't have any big goals beyond that. All 3 of them, none of them did anything interesting after they were done with medical school. But because they wanted to do well, and I know the personalities, all 3 of them are very quiet, they're very meticulous, they're very conscientious. You would call them good girls, okay? They're all actually quite pretty too. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, there wasn't anything interesting about them. They had no major goals. You know, I was determined to become an all-time great doctor, scientist or something, so I was way more motivated than that. You know, they didn't care about their residency boards too much. I never heard anything about them too much in residency. I actually trained with 2 of them, okay? And I know for a fact, one of them never said or did a single interesting thing in their residency program, okay? And I know the other one was pretty much the same thing too. So what I'm trying to say is they just wanted to do well in med school, get a decent residency, and then have a nice life, you know, make money and have a family, live in a nice neighborhood. Okay, that was their goal in life. All right, and I say that because I was super motivated in residency too, and wanted to crush it, and was very intense in residency, unlike them. So you don't have to be that way at all. All you have to do is be very conscientious, hardworking, and dedicated to school when you're young. Okay, but you got to know study skills. It makes a giant difference. You raise your academic IQ about 30 points. Why wouldn't you want to do that? Also, you need to study summer, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter vacation. These girls were studying in their free time, okay? And you should do that. You should study in the summer. Get ready for your classes. Buy the books in advance and start studying those topics. Watch YouTube videos. You should study during Christmas vacation. You should study during Easter vacation. You should study every weekend. Because I've seen a lot of the students who are not doing well, they think they owe themselves a break. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes you could be burned out. You need a break. That's also why you should get yourself psyched up to want to learn and master your field so that it's easier to study. If you want to learn, it's easier to study. Let's see. What else? Walk and talk self-test is the best study skill. You just close the book, walk around, and start talking to yourself. Repeat everything back. The reason is then you become articulate with the material. You can have a conversation about it. And that's really, the high-level students can converse about the subject. Okay? Like imagine you ask me a question about the brain. You know, what is the significance of this finding on a brain MRI? What does this imply for the patient? I would sit there, look at the films, and have a conversation with you. Okay, I wouldn't say, can you give me that in the form of a Scantron multiple choice question? No, I can discuss it. Like when I was learning biology at Stanford, I hung around with these guys. I found a guy who was, my first semester at Stanford, I was not that good a student. I got like B's and B minuses in easy classes. I was recruited as an athlete, not as a student. And then I was afraid I was going to flunk out when I started taking harder classes. I found a guy who was getting A pluses, and I just said, hey, can you help me in school? How do you do it? And all I did was hang around with him and just imitate him. And he studied all the time. He had good condensed notes, and we had a lot of conversations about the classes. I took a biology class with him, and we would go bird watching together. And then he had a friend who was a professor who was a bird watcher, naturalist guy, and he would take us bird watching, and we sit there, we discuss the ecology of it, we discuss the behavior of the different birds, population stuff, and that would lead us to talking about population genetics, that would lead us to talking about evolution, that would lead us to talk about the different theorists of evolution, you know, like Stephen Jay Gould. And I think Stephen Jay Gould, by the way, is a BS artist, okay? But at the time when I was a young guy, reading his books and discussing them about evolution helped me to get all the concepts clear. And that's what I'm talking about. The A+ students are conversant on the subject matter. You know, the B students just look at their notes, they're highlighting and hope and their C students and the D students, and they hope they recognize their highlighter stuff the next day on the test. Whereas the A+ students can just have a conversation about all this stuff because they're more interested in it. They put more time into it, and they work towards conversation level skills. They have somebody they can talk to. What are other things that help you to ramp up your academic performance? Another thing is no beat music. I never met a smart person in my whole life who listens to beat music. No grunge music. Heavy metal can be okay if it's melody and you listen to it while you're working out, you're lifting weights. But you don't listen to music with vocals while you're studying. It's best to not listen to any music while you're studying. When I was in college, I would listen to Bach, Baroque, Handel, Arcangelo Corelli, Telemann. I would listen to that sort of stuff when I was in college. But by the time I got to med school and later on residency, I never listened to music again. I'll have ear protectors, and I'll put these ear protectors on when I'm studying. Basically, you can't turn your ears off. So if you hear something, it distracts you. So you keep it silent, and you basically increase your intellectual bandwidth. So that's good. Good to have a nice quiet study room. Good to keep all your books organized. Keep them, all the biology books on one shelf, all the chemistry books on another shelf, so you know how to find stuff. And if you move them in clear boxes so you don't lose anything. Okay, what else? You have to basically, also it's good to have an attitude of I will show them, because some people say, you suck, you're never going to achieve anything in school. And so you say, I'll show that fucking bastard. I can do it. Okay, and I would also see other people who were doing better than me, like a couple of guys my senior year of high school, guys on the cross country team, done better than me on the SAT test. And I was pissed off because I took the SAT test as a junior, thinking of myself as a future athlete, national champion, and I'm like, I don't care about this stupid test. It's not irrelevant to my life, career, future. And then those guys did better than me, and I got injured. I thought I might not be an athlete anymore. And I'm like, man, I better do good at school. So I just bought one of those books, for 10, 20 bucks. And I went through all the SAT stuff. I took it 3 more times, and my score went up about 300 points. Okay, so that's it. My brain didn't change. My IQ didn't change, but they considered it an IQ test, so you can do better on an IQ test if you study for it. Okay, so that's good to have, The other thing, too, like in my residency program, when I first went there, one of the head residency attendings, said to me, our first Puerto Rican resident, our first Hispanic resident, I better, watch my hubcaps in the parking lot. I didn't say anything. I just smiled at him, but I was like, yeah, fuck you, pal. I'm going to be the best resident in this whole program of any age, let alone my own age group. And maybe one of the best, if not the best that ever trained here. You just watch, okay? And I would love to sort of stick it in his face that I would just sort of dominate the conference room. I was very well prepared for conference. For my boards and residencies, a 4.5 hour test, I've done like an hour and 10 minutes with a perfect score, okay? I just crushed it, all right? And I tell you that because you're going to face adversity. You're going to face people who don't like you, who are nasty to you, who are unfair to you. That's just a fact of life. And so it's good to have this attitude, well, fuck them. If they're not nice to me, I'll just prove that I'm better than them. Like Frank Sinatra had said, the best revenge is overwhelming success, So it's just like, yeah, watch that, okay? And also I would say to myself, if it is, I heard this with some other athlete saying this, if it is to be, it is up to me. I have to make it happen. No one gives a shit about me except my parents love me, and that's about it, okay? I'm on my own. So if I'm going to make anything happen in my life, I have to do it. Once in a while you're lucky somebody's nice to you, but most of the time people ignore you. And sometimes people are downright nasty to you and unfair to you. So you just have to say, I'm going to be so good, even if they mess with me, I'm still going to be successful. I like the Dabrowski theory of personality disintegration and reintegration. So what that is basically he said that sometimes you suffer a setback or disappointment and you feel like you failed and you're just really sad. But instead of moping about it for a prolonged amount of time, you have to say, I'm going to take all my energy and frustration and put it into this new activity, whatever that might be. And like for me, I was real sad that my wrestling career wasn't as good as I had wanted it to be. I had the athletic ability to be a national champion, at least an All-American. And I was like one match away from being an All-American. But anyways, actually, I'll tell you one more thing about my second year at Stanford. I was having a hard time. I didn't do so well in the wrestling season. I got re-injured again. I was thinking about quitting wrestling, and I was even thinking about dropping out of Stanford, going somewhere else for college, closer to home. I was from the Chicago area. And the head wrestling coach did not like me. He was sort of a California guy, saw me as a Midwestern barbarian scumbag. He didn't like Midwest guys. And Mark Schultz was, one of the assistant coaches, and he was nice to me. And he's like, Rogers, there's nothing wrong with you. You ain't quitting. Hang around with me. So I started hanging around with Mark Schultz. He's a 3-time national champion, world and Olympic champion. And he started telling me all these stories about wrestling with the Russians and about his brother Dave was also a superstar wrestler. And just from being around him, his confidence level, he's like, he's ready to go dominate the world championship. I'm like, the least I could do is, win the next dual meet, okay? So I came back that next year and I set the all-time school record for victories in a season, 39, was team captain, student athlete of the year at Stanford University. And I just tell you that because when you get around good people, it rubs off on you. It's contagious. That you get something good from them. So all I did was hang around with a guy who was a great student, and I became a much better student. The next semester, after getting all B's and B minuses, I got my first A minus in something. I'm like, oh my God, I can get an A at Stanford, okay? And then the next quarter system, they're on quarters, not semesters, I got straight A's after that, and I got pretty much straight A's on almost everything afterwards, after that. So let's see, what else? So just be around people who are successful, and it will rub off on you to some degree. Imitate them as much as you can. Don't be too cocky or arrogant. That's not the problem here. Let's see what else. Study a lot for standardized tests. You got to focus all your energy into one thing. So, when you're studying for your boards exam, for your MCATs, it's not the time to do pleasure reading. Okay, I'm an old guy now. I'm 61 years old. If I want to pleasure read, I can read a novel. Okay, I can listen to one in my car. But when you're young and you're going through the intense, meat grinder, pre-med, the hot red pre-meds or whatever in your class, you need to just focus on your studying. I didn't read for pleasure when I was going through my difficult college classes or med school classes. Later on I would, once had more time and had more experience. But there's a time when you just can't pleasure read, so don't waste your time with that. Don't ever listen to beat music. Unless you're lifting weights, you can listen to, I would say, a little I like heavy metal, for lifting weights is fine. But not grunge heavy metal. Melody heavy metal, to help you lift the weight if you want. But never other than that. Because the loud noise, the grunge music, the dissonant music, it pushes thoughts out of your head. You want to be quiet. You want to be contemplative. And I would drive, and I would just, when I was driving the car, I'd be like, let's say I'm driving home on the weekend to go to my parents' house. My mom would do my laundry for me. I would just talk to myself. Okay, this is how glycolysis is. Glucose comes into the cell. It's phosphorylated. That adds a big charge to it, increases its size, so it can't exit out the membrane. Okay, then it's isomerized to fructose. Okay, so I'm talking to myself in the car, saying everything back to myself, so I know that I know the whole pathway. And if I forget a step, I'll go look that up when I get home, and that helps me to learn it. So basically, you have to just put all your energy into a narrow focus because that enables you to do more. Your whole life should revolve around. You got to have good time management skills. And really, you just have to go through 1 or 2, sometimes 3 really boring years, kind of lonely and miserable. And that's just how it is, especially for guys. Because you know what they say about women. Women don't care about your struggles. They just hang out the finish line and sleep with the winners, okay? So you want to eventually be a winner in some way, whatever that is for. But don't think, the girls are going to be too nice to you while you're just a lowlife working your way up the ladder in academics, in college or, the first 2 years of grad school. It's just a fact. Let's see, what else? So what I'm trying to say is just realize people can do way better. So the second time around, study your tail off, take a class in the summer, take a DVD class, take an online class. You want to show up expecting to be the best in the class. Because even if you're not the best in the class, if you're trying to be the best student in the room, you'll probably do real well. And the other thing is I was just trying to learn the material. I wasn't that stressed out because I was just trying to learn the material. I had the idea that someday I'm going to be a great scientist or doctor. Therefore, I need to learn all this stuff. So I'm just going to keep on soaking it up. And what I saw was because I wanted to learn, I wasn't just trying to get a grade. I kept on absorbing the material better than other people. And the more time went by, I just would have this giant advantage over them of having all this background knowledge that they didn't have because they would forget everything. Whereas I would tend to retain a lot of material from one course to the next because I saw it as part of my development as a future scientist or doctor. So yeah, realize you can improve a tremendous amount. And if you've read a whole bunch on that subject before the first class, you should be ahead of everyone else, okay? And if you can, get the old tests from the library, talk to students who've taken the class before, pre-read the night before for all lectures, have the syllabus and do that. You always want to have an edge because the guy with an edge, comes out ahead. You just do. So, like I said, I've seen people improve tremendously. I've had nursing students who are flunking out. They come back to me. They study with me. They end up first in the class. I've had doctors who flunked their boards 5 times. They just study with me 3-4 times, and then they pass their boards. Okay, so the stuff I'm telling you, it works at the highest levels. So just give it a try. Watch my other videos. They're all free. They're all on this YouTube channel. Just type in how to raise IQ, how to be a better student, all the stuff, and learn it. You'll see it works. Okay, I hope that helps you.